I didn't know what to speak to you about. But I said Hashem will put the words in my mouth. Okay? Something חכמינו זיכרונם לברכה say שאדם מדבר על מה שקרוב לליבו. A person talks about what's close to his heart. And what's very close to my heart, so I'm being honest, what's very close to my heart in this day and age is the strength of Jewish women. The power and strength of the Jewish woman. I live in Israel. I hear the sirens. 2 weeks before I left, I was walking through the park on my way home, and a big missile fell in Yehuda v'Shomron, and I was by myself in the park, and the earth trembled, and I also trembled. And throughout the year, I look at every 18-year-old boy, and I think in 3 months from now he's going to be in the army. And I look at my sons who learn in yeshiva and who took upon themselves to learn more masechtot and more siyumim and more pages of Gemara, because that's how they are fighting this battle. And I think to myself, this is not only Israel. There's so much anti-Semitism in the United States of America. In France, I have women that I taught many years ago who called me and said, we are afraid. Can you give us a shiur of chizuk? We're afraid to go out of our houses. I have a brother who made a wedding 6 weeks ago in England. And when we came to England, the wedding was on Thursday. And on Friday morning, I'm a woman, I have children. I said to my brother, Yossi, I want to go shopping. I never have a chance, the whole year I don't have a chance to go shopping. I'm so busy, I want to go shopping. So he said to me, but don't go to the town square. And I said to him, why not? Every year I went to the town square. I want to go to the House of Fraser. I want to go to Selfridges. I want to see what there is. I usually go and maybe I come home with a black sweater. But I said, and he said to me, no, not the town square. He said, we aren't welcome there. He said to me, go to a mall where you will feel more comfortable. And he took me to a different place. So we all have a sense that the clock is ticking. Tick, 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 tick. So gesund. And when the clock is ticking, some people put a pillow over their ears and they say, I don't want to hear. Yes? You know, when there are alarms, everybody reacts very differently. I saw when the sirens went on in Israel, and my American students who never, ever, ever heard a siren in their life, and all of a sudden they hear sirens, and we brought in security to explain to them what the siren is, and we brought in a soldier that was hurt in Gaza, and they sent him back before they send him to the north to recuperate, to become healthy. So meantime, he was our security personnel. Every day he walked 25 times around the building, and he taught the girls when you hear a siren, what to do. But it's very interesting. Celebrating 100 years to the New York Times. I'm sorry that I didn't buy 2 editions, because today that edition of the New York Times costs $5,000 and they're not reprinting. So it had 3 front pages. The first front page was the news that was in January 1st, the year 1900, 100 years ago, when the New York Times opened up. What was the news in the year 1900? It was very, very interesting. It was Ford was coming out with the first model of a car that didn't require somebody pulling the engine from the back, but it was starting the engine from the front, And it was a car that was strong enough for 6 people. It had the driver, a passenger, and 4 seats in the back looking at each other. So it was very interesting. It had a roof and it didn't have a roof. They wrote about all the things that happened in the year 1900. Then their second front page was the news in the year 2000. Now we're 100 years later. What's the news of the day on the front page of the New York Times? Then they had a third front page. The third front page is news 100 years from now. That was, I want you to know, it was fascinating. So the news 100 years from now was, in other words, front page is the headlines, right? Headline was, robots, do they have a right to vote? And a whole discussion. Headline number 2. It was called In Hindsight. Looking back, are robots helpful to society? Who today would you turn to for an answer? To a human being or to a robot? That was question number 2. Headline number 2 with a big discussion. Who is natural intelligence? Let's go back to the year 2000. Is natural intelligence greater than, they didn't have the word artificial intelligence, they didn't have the word AI, but is the human intelligence going to be greater than robotic intelligence? What is going to be greater? They took in consideration emotions, feelings, sensitivities, the ability of the human mind to calculate information versus emotion, and is a robot able to do that? It was fascinating. All the cars flew, no car drove, all cars flew. There was air traffic, there was ground traffic. There were very few cars out because people sent the car out to do errands to a store. A robot came out of the store and put the food in the back of the robotic car. The robotic car turned around and drove it back to your house. And so the third article was dealt with, is it healthy for people not to have to step out of their house for 10 months a year? It was very interesting. At the bottom of the third page, remember the first page was the year news of the year 1900, what happened 100 years ago, headlines. Second page is the news in the year 2000. Third page is in the year 2100, 76 years from now. What will the world look like? The headlines. At the very bottom of the page, it said, candlelight timing on January 1st, 2100 will be at 5:01. The New York Times always has candlelighting. Big 5:01. So, obviously, one of the Jewish people who saw this said to himself, very interesting. So he called the editor of the New York Times. I am sorry that I do not remember his name, who is not Jewish, who is Catholic Irish. And he said to him, did Chabad pay to put candlelighting at the bottom of the page? And the New York Times editor, this Catholic Irish Catholic, said, no, not at all. But when I am projecting news for the year 2100, people will look back and say, oh, he was so imaginative, what made him do this? Or, nothing here that he wrote is true. So most of my headlines that I wrote, robots, were guesswork. I guessed. But one thing is factual. The world will always have Jewish women lighting candles. That you can count on. So I looked up to see when will be when will the sun be setting on Friday in the year 2100. And I know Jewish women light 20 minutes before sunset. So I wrote that in the year 2100, fact, Jewish women will light at 5:01. Okay. When I read this, I was very moved because I said to myself, it's an interesting thing. An Irish Catholic knows something that we sometimes forget. The ability of Jewish women to bring illumination to the world. This Irish Catholic knew this, and we sometimes forget. And we need to understand our strength and our energy. Okay? So in this class, I want to work through a particular energy of Jewish women. And even though it will sound like I am choosing something very odd to talk about, I think that in its conclusion, you will find it as something practical. Okay? I hope. I don't know. I hope. When we talk about Sarai Menu, who was the first one? If we're going to talk about a woman, we're going to talk about Sarai Menu, yes? Because Chava we have no information about. We don't have any understanding about a woman that God made. Like I don't have an understanding. Nobody in the world has an understanding. But Sarai Menu, the Torah gives us information about Sarai. I want to talk about Sarai Menu because she did outreach. Apparently she was connected to many, 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 many women. And I want to understand what her strength was. It doesn't tell us that she gave lectures. It doesn't tell us that she gave speeches. It doesn't tell us that she knew the whole Torah. The Torah wasn't given. But it does tell us that she was a woman of particular strength. And I want to understand what her strength was. And I think if we understand it, we can all walk away and say to ourselves, this is something that I can do. Sarai Menu was a quintessential nurturer. You know what a nurturer is? A nurturer is a person who doesn't keep all the good qualities God gave them to themselves, but a nurturer is somebody who gives out their good qualities, okay? Shares them. The fact that women light candles makes a lot of sense, because lighting candles brings some level of illumination. We all understand that. In other words, how many times, I'm going to give an example, okay? So we understand this concept. When I was 5 years ago, I think it was about 5 years ago, it was just such a terrible experience, but it taught me so much. 5 years ago, I come during January to interview students and see, because Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of girls who apply to my seminary who would like to come. And I go in January to interview all the girls and then see which makes sense, that I think would be happy in my seminary and it would make sense for them. But this time I remember thinking to myself, when I come in January and I see my parents who are not getting younger, I'm always so rushed. I want to come like 3 weeks earlier just to visit my parents. I'm going to leave Eretz Yisrael Thursday midnight. I will land in America Friday morning. I'll spend Shabbat by my parents and I will leave America on Mosei Shabbat. I'll be back in Eretz Yisrael on Sunday. Monday I'm back in school. I ended up staying another day because my father said to me, stay another day. Stay another day. So I said, Abba asks, I will. And I stayed another day. I said to myself afterwards, see, your father asks and you listen to your father, you gain something. So I went to visit somebody who was a teacher in my seminary and moved back to America. And I knew that she had a sick baby. And I wanted to visit and see how everything was and to say hello. So I took my parents' car at 8 o'clock in Muncie, New York. I took my parents' car at 8 o'clock in the evening. And I said to my parents, I'm leaving at 8. When I'm in my parents' house, I become like a girl who is 10 years old. I have to tell them what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, when am I going to sleep, where am I going, how long am I going for, and when will I be back. So I said to my parents, it's 8 o'clock. In Mirza Hashem, I'll be back at 9. I took my parents' car. It was December time. I drive. it started to snow a little bit. Okay. I visit this teacher. I hear about the sick baby. I see Baruch Hashem. There's a procedure that he will heal. 8:25. I get into the car. By now it's snowing very heavy snow. My father has a good car, an expensive car. I get into the car. I said to myself, what should I do? I should stay. I should go. My nature, unfortunately, I said, I'll risk it. So I get into the car. I start to drive. It's 10 minutes away from my parents' house. I don't want to exaggerate, I will say within 50 seconds, not even a minute, I made a terrible mistake. The snow was coming down so heavy, I couldn't see. The windshield wipers didn't even help. They moved, it was already covered with snow. It was heavy snow, it was a blanket of white. I want to tell you something, a blanket of white becomes very dark when it's a heavy blanket. It's no longer white, it's dark, and it's very scary. Now, I started to drive, and I didn't know what to do. If I stop driving, there's a car behind me. He's also driving. He's going to crash into me. I couldn't tell if I was going to the right or going to the left because it was so dark and so slippery. I lost my sense of directions. I said to myself, I'll find myself in somebody's dining room. I was really, truly terrified. First of all, I learned that nature is so powerful and that man in the fanciest car, the most modernized car, is helpless against snow. It's just snow, but I was helpless. What could I do? There was a car in front of me. So I could see a tiny little red dot. I had no idea if he was going up the hill, down the hill, if he was going to Canada. I had no idea where he was going, but I said to myself, there is a dot of light. I am following it. And I stuck to that little dot of red light for about 10 minutes. And then there was a few minutes that the snow eased. And I could already a little see where I was. And within 10-15 minutes, I came to my parents' house. My parents were standing in the window. They were white. Where was I? My father asked me, how did you get here? I said, your prayers is how I got here. And then I said to my mother, there was a dot of light, and I stuck to it. And that's how I found my way. So my mother said to me, you're describing our life in this world. Each one of us finds our dot of light, and we stick to it. And we hope that that dot of light, that dot of truth that we cling to will guide us correctly to the correct destination. Isn't that true? We all have what we cling to. And as life goes on, we try to learn more and expand more so that dot of light is not such a little dot of light. It becomes bigger and bigger so that it could navigate us correctly to where we want to get to. Women were not made from external fiber. The Midrash says that women were made from internal place. That means that women by nature are nurturers, are more spiritually inclined, are internal people. By the way, if you do a survey of 100 men speaking and 100 women speaking about something that took place, and in Israel they did that because they would ask, they would ask a woman, what did you see? They would ask a man, what did they say? They say, men always say, I saw, I heard. Women always say, I feel, it seems to me, my sense told me. Women listen to hear. Men trust what they see, men trust what they hear. Women trust what they feel. Women are more internal. Women are nurturers. Therefore, women light candles, so that women should recognize that they have the power of illumination wherever they are. When a man smiles at his children, it's nice. When a woman smiles at her children, all is good with the world. There's a certain peace that comes from a woman's smile. I was teaching once a class on feminism, And I said to them, it's always odd for me that we have to teach women a class in feminism. There's nobody who recognizes the power of women more than the Jewish religion. In the secular world, they don't know what to do with women. They, when they wanted to say they put women at a window listening to some knight in shining armor who played for her violin underneath the window. Like, what are you going to do with the window what are you going to do with the women in the 18th century? Please pay attention that women played no role in secular history. History didn't know what to do with women. What are women? They are decorations. In Jewish history, women play the most dominant role. The soul of every child that will come to the world passes through the women, not through the men. I don't care how modern technology is. It goes through the women. The mothers play a tremendous role in our history. The biggest role. Not only that, our sages tell us that the Jews in Egypt came out because of the strength of women, and the Jews of Egypt and the Jews in the end of times will survive because of the strength of Egypt. And I want to tell you just as a PS, every Friday when I am cooking, baking, cleaning, I go to seminary, I teach. I send everybody back to the dorm. I wish everybody could Shabbos. I come home, I stayed up the night before and until 5 o'clock in the morning. Everybody does what works for them. For me, it works. I live in Israel. There's no such thing as maids. The help makes much more money than I do, so I think 3 times, do I want to have help or do I not want to have help? On Thursday, I start to cook at 8 o'clock in the evening, and I cook through the night until about 5 o'clock in the morning. The reason is because my husband and my children come home, and I'm a nurturer, right? We all are. And I love to say to them, I just made kugel. You want? Sure they want. I have no kugel left by the time they finish, so we make another one. So I cook until 5 o'clock in the morning, then I take a shower, and then I go to sleep from 5:30 until 7:30. And 7:30 I get dressed, I daven, I get dressed, I go to school. I'm in school because if I'm in school, everybody's there. So, and then at 12 o'clock, everybody goes home. I work with the secretary preparing for Sunday. The secretaries go home. One of the workmen locks up the building. I come home. And then, to make sure that the table is set, I have a daughter. She always says, Mommy, it's me and you against the world. And she helps me. We set the table. I always have like 10 or 15 guests besides my own family. And my son, my Maishi, who comes home from yeshiva at 2, his job is to do the bedrooms. So the beds are set. I don't have so many bedrooms. I have 4 bedrooms. One is us, the rest is for the children. And I have a daughter who says that since we moved to this house, she slept in her bedroom 25 times because there's always other people sleeping there. And every Friday I always say to myself, women are the heroes of the world. You can't expect a man to do 1/8 of what I'm doing. And I'm married to a genius. My husband is classified as a genius. And he's a massive dayan and a talmid chacham. Whenever I ask him to do something, he says to me, I'm on the phone. I think to myself, I'm on the phone and I cook and I bake and I talk to the kids and I make other phone calls and I do laundry and I do psychology at the same time. What do you mean? You're on the phone. And I'm not making fun of men at all. At all. Being that men are made for more solid nature, there is less flexibility to the men. Being that women are made for more internal fiber, there's far more flexibility to the women. So women are wow. I always think to myself, like, we are wow. Let's face it. Let's just sit down and just say so. We're wow. Now I want to talk about a concept of nurturing from Sarai Menu, and let's hope that it's understood. It says about Sarai Menu, I want to start with the first piece about Sarai Menu, and then I'll come to the second piece. The first piece about Sarai Menu that I want to talk about is the nurturing piece. Okay? It says about Sarai Menu that her name, she had another name. Her name was also Yiska. Yiska. Maze Yiska. You know the word sukkah? Sukkah means an umbrella. Why was Sarai Menu called Yiska? The Gemara says, Shahakol Sochim Biyofya. Everybody was umbrellaed by her beauty, and she was umbrellaed Beruach HaKodesh. In other words, she was enveloped by Ruach HaKodesh. That's the second reason. Hakol Sochim Biyofya. Everybody is enveloped in her beauty, and she is enveloped in Ruach HaKodesh. when I came across that Gemara, I said to myself, everybody is enveloped in her beauty? How does that work? When I was teaching in Eshet Torah, I remember many, many years ago, I had a student, I don't know what her Jewish name is, her name at the time was Jessica. She was a model for Karl Lagerfeld. I don't really have knowledge of these things, to say the truth, not because it's weird, but I just don't. It doesn't come my way. But we had two people, and I met a lot of people in my teaching in Eshet Torah, which broadened, these brave, special women broadened my horizons in a fantastic way. One of them was the designer for Donna Karan, New York. And whatever design was super successful, she would always try it out. She would try it out on the different women in IAT. She would say, could you wear it? Could you tell me if it's comfortable? Is it, and she would say, okay, let's redo. So she was a designer of Donna Karan, New York. She took off for a year, and she was great. And the other one was a model for Karl Lagerfeld. She was in IAT in Eshet Torah for 3 months. She took a year's break from the Vogue, and she never came back to Vogue. And I'll tell you something, as a PS, her daughter came to my seminary, and the daughter was not as beautiful as the mother, thank goodness. But it was like such a pleasure to meet her daughter 20 years later. One day I come to teach in Eshet Torah. I taught on Monday evenings and on Thursday mornings. One day I come to teach in Eshet Torah. I think it was a Thursday morning class. And she's not there. So I said to the ladies, there were about 25 ladies in the class, I said, oh, where's Jessica? And they said, oh, Rabbanita, she left you a letter. There was a letter from Jessica to me. And I said to them, everything is okay? And they said, yeah. She went to Yerushalayim. She spoke to Rebbetzin Weinberg, and they agreed that the level in Eshet Torah was too high for her, and she'd be happier in Neve. So she went to Neve. There was a very good relationship between Eshet Torah and Neve. So I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I liked her very much. I said, I'm so sorry. We're going to miss her. So one of the girls said to me, Mrs. Koenig, we're not going to miss her at all. I said, you're kidding. Why not? And she said, because I am tired of feeling fat and short every single day. And I looked at her and I laughed. I said to myself, she's right. She was 6'2". She weighed maybe 110 pounds. And she was really, truly beautiful. She was beautiful. She was beautiful in the morning. So everybody looked short and fat next to her, but like everybody, we all looked like, because she was so tall and she was radiant. And I said to myself, after we had this exchange, I right away said, forget it, never mind what I want to teach. Girls, let's have a different conversation. I said to them, how does this work? It said about Sarai Menu that everybody was enveloped in her beauty, and she was enveloped in Ruach HaKodesh. Excuse me, if Sarai Menu was so beautiful, then everybody took one look, and they went to the far away, because next to her, they all should have been ugly. So how can it be that everybody was enveloped in her beauty, and she was enveloped in Ruach HaKodesh? First of all, if she was such a tzaddikus, everybody also runs away. And second of all, if she's so beautiful, how are you enveloped in somebody else's beauty? Do you understand my question? Do we understand the question? Which leads me to another question. How does the Torah look at woman's beauty? I think it's one of the most conflicting pieces for us women. Is beauty good? Is beauty bad? Should we make an effort to look beautiful? Should we not make an effort to look beautiful? Does beauty have value? Does beauty not have value? Do you understand my question, or do you not? And I by the way, I don't think it has to do with religious women. I think every single woman in the world asks herself, every single woman in the world, and I'm speaking also about secular women, non-Jewish women, I've had conversations with them over the years. How much do I objectify myself, turn myself into an object? And how much do I not? What's the line that I want to look beautiful because I want to look beautiful? And what's the line that I want to look beautiful because I want other people to think that I'm beautiful? How much of an effort am I making for myself? How much of an effort am I making for other people's opinion about me. And as we get older and wiser, it's something that occupies all of us. Who am I living for? My agenda in life, my sense of self, is it derived from other people's opinion about me, or is it derived about myself? There's no doubt that there isn't a woman, I'm not talking to men, I'm talking to a woman. There isn't a woman in the world, I'm speaking for myself also, there isn't a woman in the world who would find that the most liberating thing in the world is for herself to say, other people's opinion about me and my looks matters to me not at all. There's no woman who's not going to say, liberation. On the other hand, we live in society, and we want to be part of society. And society and other people's opinions have a tremendous impact on us. So the balance is very difficult for each and every woman. Do you understand what I'm saying? So here we have a question, and the question is, how does the Torah look at beauty? I want to know, God created beauty. I want to know, what does he think about beauty? What is he telling me? What should I do? Okay? My quandary comes from a place that on every Friday night, the husbands are supposed to sing to their wives something that is not very complimentary, with all due respect. They're supposed to say to them, Sheker achen vehevel hayofi, every single Friday night. I think to myself, that's when I put on makeup, and that's when I try to look at myself beautiful. And my husband says to me, Sheker achen, beauty is nothing, and chen, charm is nothing, and beauty is nothing. Thank you so much. On one hand. On the other hand, if Sheker achen vehevel hayofi, can I ask you a question? If it's nothing, why is it that Hashem made Chava, the mother, the first woman in the world, as the most beautiful woman in the world? If beauty is not important, then certainly don't make the first woman beautiful. I would definitely set a rule. The Jewish mothers, were not beautiful. So now it's not something that I appreciate, because the mothers were righteous, the mothers were kind, the mothers were generous, the mothers were nurturing, but they weren't beautiful. Oh, they weren't beautiful. Okay, so you know what? I'm okay. But now Hashem tells me that not only was Chava beautiful, I understand Chava, God made her, but Sarai was the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, Rachel Imenu was the second most beautiful woman in the world. Bathsheba, the wife of David HaMelech, was the third most beautiful woman in the world. And there is a debate whether the fourth most beautiful woman in the world was either Chava Imenu or it was Abigail, another wife of David HaMelech, who was the most beautiful woman, or it's possible that it was Esther, the niece of Mordechai, who wasn't so beautiful, but God gave her so much charm that you saw her and you were like, oh wow. In other words, the Gemara has a debate. Who were the most beautiful women in the world? So, is it Sheker achen vehevel hayofi? Or is it the beauty, the value? I'm going to tell you another piece which really shocked me. You know, it talks about the creation. When God talks about the creation of the world, so on every day of the creation, it talks about what HaKadosh Baruch Hu created that day. And on the third day of creation, God created trees. Now, think about how we look at food, okay? I want my child to eat broccoli. So I say to him, Rivki, broccoli is healthy. It's tasty. Go ahead. I want you to try it. I want you to eat it. You know what it says? It says, "V'ha'etz nechmad lemar'eh." The tree was appealing to look at. V'tov lemachal. It was healthy. Now, if you don't, I don't know about you, but I think health comes before looks. But that's not what it says. It says, "V'ha'etz nechmad lemar'eh." It was appealing. You looked at it and you said, "Oh, I would love to have that." V'tov lemachal. It was tasty. So you see then the way that Hashem created the world, not only that, if you look at many of the commentaries, they'll tell you, if you take a notice, if you take a look, the level of symmetry and beauty in the world is staggering. You and I don't know any better. We could have been born into a world that's brown and brown, or blue and blue, or red and red, or red and orange. We don't know. We got used to living in a world that there's green and brown and blue. And Panama is particularly beautiful with the wealth of colors that it has. But God made a world that is extremely pleasing to the eye, and being that you and I don't know any better, he could have created a world that looks like an airplane. And I would have said, well, okay. But he didn't. And not only that, he created changing seasons. There's so much beauty that he invested in the world that he created that even if I wouldn't look at the Torah, I would say to myself, beauty is important. So we have here a contradiction. Is it, or is it not? So I'm going to conclude by an episode which I think is not going to answer the question, but is going to give everybody an opportunity to find their own answer within this story. Okay? Avraham Avinu in the Parshat Lech Lecha leaves Haran. I'm, as a person, I always think to myself, I get so moved every time I read Parshat Lech Lecha because I think to myself, really when I got married, I was almost 19. I got married to my wonderful husband and I left my parents and my family and I went to Eretz Yisrael, which is a dream to go to. But I want you to know that till today, I hunger for my homeland. I was born there. I grew up there. I have friends there. I actually wasn't born there, but I grew up there. I have my friends there still. All my family's there. So hard to leave. Really, 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 really hard to leave. And I think to myself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Avraham Avinu, he was 75 years old. He wasn't 18 and a half like I was. He was 75 years old. He was known. He was beloved. He had thousands of people who knew him. He was connected. He walked down the street and everybody said, oh, Avraham, Avraham, Avraham. Sarah walked down the street and people said, oh, Sarah, how are you? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, pack up and leave and start a journey of disconnection so you can find yourself rooted as a Jew. And with that, you'll give your children the ability, Jews in the world, the ability to pick themselves up and move for where it's right for them. So Avraham Avinu picks up and travels, he and his wife, and God held it for him. For the rest of his life, God said, I will never, ever, ever, ever forget this greatness for you, and I will reward you with wealth and with children and with a nation and so on and so forth, which he did. You know, when you do a step for God, he pays you back with kilometers, not with a step. Avraham Avinu leaves, and he travels with his wife Sarah, and they come to Egypt. And now comes a pasuk, which leaves you stunned. Avraham Avinu looks at Sarah as they are about to enter Egypt. The Nile is sparkling in front of them. They see the Egyptians, and Avraham Avinu looks at Sarah and says, wow, Hinei na yadati ki isha yafat mare'at. I now know that you are the most beautiful woman. I'm afraid that the Egyptians will see you and desire you and they'll kill me. Please say that you're my sister. This way they won't. My life will be spared. And Sarah says, if that's what you want, that's what I'll do. Comes the Ramban, comes all the commentators and say, what? They've been married for 50 years. Sarah was acknowledged as the most beautiful woman in the world. In other words, it was clear to Avraham Avinu that the Egyptians, by the way, the Egyptians were black, and black was beautiful in their eyes. They didn't think that they thought that blonde people were blonde and light-skinned were missing blood. In other words, it wasn't that they looked at the Simon and they said, oh my gosh, she's blonde, she's beautiful. Not at all. Not at all. That's our fiction. That's not true. But Simon's beauty was international. It crossed borders and boundaries. That's what the Gemara says. So we have a question. They were married for 50 years. I don't understand when Avraham Avinu met Sarah first time when he met her to marry her. He didn't say to himself, wow, she's so beautiful. He didn't say that. And when he saw her at the wedding, he didn't say to himself, I am married to the most beautiful woman. God said she's most beautiful. I mean, she's obviously ravishingly beautiful. What, he didn't know she's beautiful? And every time when she finally gave birth later on, he didn't know that she was beautiful. And when all the malachim and all the people came into their house for Kiruv, he didn't see the difference between her and everybody else. He didn't know. What in the world? Now I know? Not only that, if you look at the Ramban, he raises a question which is shocking. He says, look, I'm going to use, he says shahaderech menavedet, but I'm going to explain that in a little bit of a contemporary language. You know, you'll take a very, very beautiful woman and you'll put her on the plane from Panama on a 16-hour flight to Israel. We all agree that by the time she lands 16 hours later, even if she flew business and even if she slept, could we all agree that 16 hours later, she's not as beautiful as she was when she got on the plane? Anybody who's ever been on a plane will agree, okay? She didn't go on a plane. She traveled for 3 months on a camel in the desert. And those conditions, There were no baths. There were no bathhouses. This is a desert. There's no air conditioning. There's the heat. There's flies. The sun burns your skin. The dust gets into your eyes and gets all over again. You're desperate for a bath. She's traveling for 3 months on a camel. I don't know how comfortable a camel is, but I venture to say that there are more comfortable things than sitting on a camel for 3 months. And now that they finally came to Egypt, and she gets off the camel, and she's after 3 months of travel, I can't imagine how much dust has been clinging to her, even if they wash their faces. But can we use a little imagination? We could all picture this a little bit. Now Avraham Avinu looks at her and says to her, I now know that you're the most beautiful woman in the world. But we're all grateful for that pasuk, because that pasuk tells us something about ourselves and about women, which is not connected to cosmetics, is not connected to our hair, is not connected to our figures. And in order to explain what it means, what Avraham Avinu saw by Sarah Imenu, which was so illuminated, I'll tell you a story that I read. Now, I read this in Paul Johnson's History of the Jews. Okay. Now, I read this at least 12 years ago. So being that I read this at least 12 years ago in Paul Johnson's History of the Jews, which is a 1,000-page book, and I really have to say that I did not read every page with dedication. I think that I read it so that I could say that I read Paul Johnson's History of the Jews, and I found it really interesting, so I ended up reading it much more than I thought I would, but I skipped around. There's a very interesting story over there. There's a story about Queen Victoria, who is, I think she was, I don't know if she was the mother or the grandmother of King George, who was the father of Queen Elizabeth, who's the father, who is the mother of King Charles. Queen Victoria, at the time when Queen Victoria was queen, England was still going around saying the sun never set on I forgot what they called it, but on England. In other words, England was an empire, and part of the empire was India. Am I telling you something you all know? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
More or less, and even if you don't know, you kind of remember that maybe once upon a time you learned it in school. And Queen Victoria wanted to meet the troops, her troops in Bombay, and to see how the English monarchy is being received in India. Okay? So now, I have to say that from here, it's fuzzy. I don't remember if she traveled all the way to Bombay. I don't remember if she met them midway. But I remember that she traveled on it was describing the great meeting that took place between the vizier, the Hindu representative of the royalty of the Indians, who came forth with all the dignitaries to meet Queen Victoria, wherever this was. And Queen Victoria, they had gone off they traveled by boat and they traveled by horses. And now they traveled as courtesy of the Indians. They sent them camels, which were very well padded. And so they switched to camels and they rode to wherever it is that they rode. I don't know where it was, okay? And the entourage all come, soldiers and dignitaries and administrators and the queen and her ladies in waiting. And the Hindu lord, whatever it is, comes straight towards Queen Victoria, and he says, it is a tremendous honor to meet our queen, our gracious monarch, Queen Victoria. And he bows 10 times. And she says to him, I'm not wearing my crown. She was going to wear it tonight for the reception. I'm not wearing my crown, nor am I wearing my jewels. How did you know that I was the queen? And he said, only a queen can sit upright on the back of a camel for so many hours. And when I read that story, I loved that story. Because all of a sudden the story illuminated for me something. What Avraham Avinu saw in Sarah Imenu was the internal dignity that a Jewish woman is capable of no matter what. We Jewish women are nurturers. We Jewish women have soft energy. We Jewish women are so strong. We Jewish women know how to imbue husbands, children, friends, neighbors, with a kind word. We Jewish women feel like if nobody else can, we have to. There's a reason why Jewish women become nurses. They want to heal, they want to aid, they want to help. There is an inner strength to Jewish women that shines brightest when all else fails. And here they are, tired and travel weary. And Avraham Avinu looks at Sarai Menu, and he's not looking at makeup. He's not looking at gleaming hair. He's not looking at a glamorous figure. He's not looking at perfect features. He's looking for a dignity which just shines through. A woman who knows who she is and what her purpose is, which radiates from her so much. And he looks at her and he says, wow, this is the test of beauty. Not the beauty pageants that they have where women bathe themselves for 6 months in oils and whatever it is in order to be the most beautiful. This is the test of beauty. When you're deprived of everything, and you can still shine. And you still hold on to your inner dignity. Wow. You're truly, truly beautiful. The Egyptians never met anything like that in the world. I'm worried. Can you say you're my sister? When Sarai Menu, how come the women were not, why did they not run away from her beauty or from her righteousness? It's scary. It's overwhelming. Because what was overriding above was strength, nobility, and nurturing. And strength and nobility and nurturing don't frighten. They're a magnet. I'm concluding. The women in Egypt, I think to myself a lot. I love the Torah, I love the Psukim. They talk to me louder than anything else talks to me, because in the world of fake and imagination, it's the only real thing that exists. The women in Egypt, I think to myself, how come they didn't just say, oh, I'm not having a child, not in this era. I'm not having a single child. Besides their husbands, they married the children of the 12 tribes. These men became slaves. They worked all day long brick building. After a couple of years, what do you think happened to these intelligent men? They became common laborers, rough men. I don't know that they were so pleasant to live with. I don't know that they were so easy. I think they were impatient. I think they were rude. I think they were angry. I think they were horrified. I think they saw death every single day. I think they had no pleasantness left to them. And the women took out from within themselves softness, sweetness, nobility, hope, illumination. And they gave these men a feeling that they're men. And thus they nurtured the men. They brought children to the world, a nation that can go out of Egypt. We all know, we all feel the clock ticking. We all understand that the world as we know it, and you're sophisticated and wise women, you all understand that the world as we know it, with the liberalism which is destroying every decency that exists in the world, we all know that we're coming to a world that's coming to an end. What something looks like when it comes to an end, I don't know. But the Gemara is saying that the strength of women are the ones that enabled the men to come out of Egypt. And they were not talking about physical strength. And the strength of women will enable the women to guide the Jewish people towards at the end of times. What strength? I think that we don't lose our inner dignity. I think that we're not going to fall apart. I think that we have nurturing, kind word to each other. I think that we see somebody who has a hard time and we reach out a hand and we hold tightly. I think that we try to give a good word. I think that we nurture within us what's really, truly qualitative, that is not dependent on grooming and makeup. We all want to look good. The Hashem put in women a desire to look good, and we should look good. But that's not the bottom line. The bottom line is that my grandmother was the only survivor from her family All her brothers and sisters all died. And she was the only survivor from her whole entire family. And she was the most nurturing woman in the world that I know. And every time she had a hard time, she said, I'm left alive, and I'm here to be, instead of my father, my mother, my 9 brothers and sisters and all their children. So if I am the representative of all of that, I must be pretty powerful. And she would beam a smile. And in the hardest days that she had, in the hardest times, and she went through many hard times, she always gave us a radiant smile, and she said, I am left alive as a representative of such a large family. Clearly, I can. And she would beam a radiant smile. And I thought to myself, I always thought my grandmother was the most beautiful woman in the world because she always radiated positivity. And I always looked at her as an illumination. And it was interesting to me, sometimes I would say to my children, Sata was the most beautiful woman in the world, and they would say to me, Mommy, you objectively, not saying, there's no objectively. That smile, that inner courage that she had in the face of so many things, I've never seen anything more beautiful. I think God wants us to find what the truth is and to cling to it. I think HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from all of us a level of courageousness. He wants each one of us to find the emes as much as possible, each one in our own way, in our own path, and hold on to it. And he wants us to know that we can nurture, give strength, give energy, bring forth kindness and dignity in a world when it no longer exists. And as long as we give each other the strength to do so, we have an ability to usher in Mashiach's coming very soon. I hope you all took something practical, each one of you, for yourselves. That was my goal. Something practical for each and every one of us. Okay, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to speak to such ladies.